And so one of the things we had in this book, which I think is really an insight that I didn't have in the first one, was the observation that Moses was called by God in his workplace, in the burning bush of God's presence and empowerment and direction and wisdom, right? The overwhelming sense of God's presence was in his workplace.
Feeling uninspired by your work? Discover how your everyday occupation can be a pathway to personal and societal transformation. I'm Bill Gorman, campus pastor at the Brookside campus.
And I'm Paul Brandis, campus pastor at the Shawnee campus. And today on theFormed.life podcast, Tom Nelson, our lead senior pastor, joins to discuss his brand new book, Why Your Work Matters, how God uses our everyday vocations to transform us, our neighbors, and the world.
Yeah, it was a joy to have this conversation, not only with Tom, but also Johnny Daigle, who assisted Tom in working on this book. And Johnny was a pastoral resident at that time, and he currently serves as the Associate Director of Seminary Partners for Made to Flourish, our sister organization, and the Director of Pastoral Recruitment here at Christ Community.
Yeah, Why Your Work Matters is a newly expanded and updated version of Tom's 2011 book, Work Matters. It explores contemporary trends and dynamics in the workplace, including remote work, work-life balance, technology, the significance of taking a Sabbath, and the importance of working for the common good.
I got to read an early draft, and there are so many fresh insights here. So let's jump in right now. Well, Tom, Johnny, it's great to have you on the podcast today and get to have this conversation together. We're really glad you're both here.
Thank you. Yeah, so
excited to be here with you, Bill.
Yeah. Well, today I'm really excited. We get to discuss a project that both of you have been working on for some time now, and that is a book titled Why Your Work Matters, How God Uses Your Everyday Vocations, or Our Everyday Vocations, to transform, and I love this, to transform us, our neighbors, and the world. And so this is a new book that's going to be coming out. It's been this labor of love that both of you have been working together. And some of our listeners will remember that, Tom, you wrote a book. You were working on it kind of 2008, 2009, so almost 15 years ago now. Wow. It's hard to believe. Kind of on the same topic of work and connecting that to our faith and connecting Sunday to Monday, which is something we're very passionate about here at Christ Community. But Tom, I'd love to discuss two things as we begin the conversation today, and that is how is this new book, Why Your Work Matters, different from that earlier work? And then I'd love to have you talk a little bit about the transformation aspect of that subtitle, how our everyday vocations transform us, our neighbors, and the world. So talk a little bit, how are these two books different? And then I'd love to hear more about this transformation piece.
Yeah. So it was really, really beautiful to have the joy of doing this book. In many ways, it became a complete rewrite.
Yeah.
So the original one, Work Matters, was one that I was sort of early in this conversation as a pastor across the country. And while it was faithful to a biblical theology and particularly to help people reshape their paradigm of their daily life and work, which was one of the big goals of connecting worship with work and Sunday to Monday in the first book. And that still is a vital part of the themes of this particular book. But we're really excited because this book has had a lot more time to marinate.
Yeah.
It brings a rich biblical theology of creation, fall, redemption, consummation, Jesus as a carpenter, just like the first one did. We've added a lot of rich biblical theology that's accessible. But while the first book probably had a little bit more goal of changing people's minds, can I just say, or how they think, and that's important. This book not only touches the mind, but we really hope it touches the heart.
Okay.
And brings transformation to how people live, not just how they think. So the book is built around that goal of transformation of us and our world in this rich, paradigm of vocational discipleship and vocational mission. I say often in this particular book, many times, that really this book, even though it deeply addresses work, paid and unpaid in our lives and vocation, it's really a book about whole life discipleship. So that's why we're so excited about this new book.
Yeah. I really love that. Johnny, would you add anything to that as you've kind of gotten to have your hands on this project a little bit, just on that transformation aspect? Yeah. I know you're a Dallas Willard fan, as we all are at this table.
Yes, and I gained that from Tom, really, but I've just gained so much from the process, and the transformational aspect is a really important part of this book, and it's a part that I'm so passionate about, and that's been part of the fuel in my fire for this book. And I'm just so grateful to contribute to it.
Yeah, well, and maybe just talk a little bit about your role in this project. So, Tom's name is on the cover, and he's the author of this book. But so, Johnny, why are you here? What role did you get to play?
So
in this?
Tom often, long-standing pastoral residency program here at Christ Community. I was really privileged to be a part of it and really excited to be a part of it. And something that Tom has done historically as he's written books is he'll often welcome a resident to join him in his process, to be apprenticed to him in that work. And so I was thrilled to be included in that for this recent book. And so it just a privilege to learn, and learned a lot about the editing process, a lot about the writing process. So it was really fun getting to learn with Tom. And he let me help a lot, but it was the sort of thing where you're sort of a child helping an adult mow the lawn. It's kind of like, are they letting me help? But it was such a gift to have someone willing to open themselves. So Tom opened himself up to me and my feedback and everything I would throw his way, and it was I learned a ton.
That's so good.
Well, also, I think in our context, it was a wonderful relational time. Much of our great joy of life and learning is relationships and spending time with Johnny and Kelly. And any endeavor worth anything is always a group endeavor. It's not solitary. Yeah. So it's been a joy to get to know Johnny better, to work with him, and also his ideas and thoughts and insights. His fingerprints are on every page, and we love that because it's a team effort. So it's an opportunity to learn, of course, for all of us. And Johnny hasn't as much experience in the whole writing, publishing process as I have. But it is a wonderful time of mutual learning, and it was really a delight to work with Johnny. I'm so grateful for his good work and the imprint he has left in this book. It's much better because Johnny was a part of it.
Oh,
thanks, Tom.
Well, I love that. And I think even that is a bit of the picture of how we understand transformation working. This sort of sense of, sometimes we use the language of tacit knowledge, but there's the idea there is that there's more than we can say about what we know. And the way that knowledge and that transformation happens is in the context of relationships working together, where this transfer of knowledge and insight and growth happens, yes, certainly through the words that we say and the things that we articulate, but often through other means as well, just of learning together and watching. Yeah. And
if I could tee off on that, there was certain experiences I had where I would watch. I would find myself overworking as a young pastor and first-time pastor, and also just managing lots of different deliverables in my life and the book project. And I found, again, tacit knowledge transfer, it's on that point, because I watched Tom very quick to say, hey, make sure you guard your family and guard your rhythms of life. And I mean, not just say it offhand, but really almost look me in the eyes and say, Johnny, you are going to do a good job guarding your family and guarding your time. And, that helped a lot. But then I also watched him. There was a key moment where there was a deadline coming up where the publisher was asking for something, and it would have been best that we had turned it in on a certain day. And Tom said, we're going to just let it ride for the weekend, and we'll get back to it next week. But I was ready to work all Saturday and knock it out. And he's like, let's not. And so anyways, that there are those little moments that I got to learn by doing and see, but I got to peek under the hood and see how he really would do it. And that helped me a lot.
Yes. You had this moment of Tom saying, this is what you should do, Johnny. And then later in the process, you had an actual modeling of that moment. We're not going to overwork on this. We're going to meet our commitments. We're going to meet our obligations, but we're going to do that at a human scale, at a human pace. That respects the important relationships in our lives.
And I think we both learned in this process there are moments of mountaintop intensity. I mean, we had deadlines. Yeah. Sometimes we really worked really hard, long hours, and times of sort of pause and reflection and waiting.
Yeah. Well, and again, the theme in that subtitle is this idea of transformation. I'm just curious for you, Johnny, and for you as well, Tom. Through this project, how do you feel like you've been changed or transformed? And just whether it was the ideas that you were working with in the book, or just something about the process itself.
Yeah, I would cite even just that little thing I just shared about.
Yeah.
How it changed me, the process, the tacit knowledge sharing of how I learned how to work in a sustainable pace. There's a whole chapter devoted to burnout in the book, and seeing that modeled and then learning to live it. And undertaking a Sabbath as a family. Anyway, it's been some transformative practices that have come to me during this season as a result of engaging this material. But I think mostly the transforming idea that all work done unto God is kingdom work is a transforming idea for me that enables me to go into my Monday world now empowered and encouraged to do whatever good work God has. Doesn't just have to be my pastoral work, but any work that is done unto Him is kingdom work, and I get to participate with Him there. That truth is taking a deeper hold in my life, and I'm grateful for it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah, Tom, what about you? Just any transformation that you've sensed in just the process of writing or working through this project? Yeah.
Well, I think one idea this book brought me to, and I'm putting it in an idea format, but I've thought a lot about it, is there's one chapter on the future of work, and particularly the area of technology and AI and so forth. And there's a lot of unknowns, of course, in this. We don't really know we're early on, but I think it made me wrestle with a theology of technology that I think is balanced but also discerning, and technology is not neutral. So I think I would say I have been spending a lot of time thinking about technology and how it relates to our workplace. And so I think that was a really new time of reflection for me. And I'm trying to ask the question, what does that mean in my life? So I would say that's one particular area where the content and much of the concepts have been things that I've been marinating on in this broader faith and economic work movement for a long time, which I feel really privileged. So I've done a lot, quite a bit of thinking and reflection on that. But I had never spent as much time thinking about technology and work in a workplace. And we're in such a high change of technology, particularly with AI. So I'm sure I'm just beginning at the surface, but that was really arresting to me, and I'm reflecting on its impact in my life.
Yeah, that's really good. And that's been a conversation we've been having here on the theFormed.life podcast. And so we'll put some links even in the show notes to some conversations we've had with John Dyer, Felicia Wusong, Joshua Smith, some others who have been speaking into this. This is something that's really shaping how we work every single day. And so I was really benefited from reading that chapter. I got to read an early draft. I was invited into that, so that was a joy. And Tom, you mentioned that there's in a lot of ways there's ideas that are very deeply centered in this kind of stream of conversation that we've been having at Christ Community for a number of years now, even back to that first book. But there's a lot of real freshness, even in those biblical theology chapters. Again, if people have been around Christ Community, they know this language of the 4-chapter story of creation, fall, redemption, new creation, consummation, ought, is, can, will, that whole story. And so that's a part of both of these books. But as I was reading back through those chapters, there was a number of just kind of fresh tidbits for me that I hadn't noticed, particularly in the creation moment. I know we're not in the first book. One of those I'll just share is the idea, Tom, that you highlighted of, we often, at least I have often thought about this kind of working and keeping of the garden being kind of this manual work of planting crops and harvesting, and it's certainly there. But you highlight kind of on this idea of technology and just kind of going on that stream, the work of naming the animals is more of a cognitive thought work that we see right there in Genesis 1. And so not to too extremely kind of bifurcate what we do with our heads and our hands, but there is these kind of it's a knowledge work aspect that I hadn't seen early on in that Genesis account. So again, maybe if you are listening and you read that early book, just know there's lots of freshness.
And I would hope that as people
Yeah.
read or reread, this whole concept, that they would experience the delight we've had in the deep marination. And it is not meant to be dense. It's also meant to be very accessible. We've written that for that purpose. But there are tributaries of thought and canonical or biblical connections in this theology that we didn't have in the first book. So we'll find it. We think you'll find it as you read it, more delightful, more insightful, and more impacting and more transformational.
Yeah. Well, so on that, maybe just talk about a little bit, we've been touching on it a little here, but what is kind of the origin story of this book? Why write this update and what really became a kind of a total rewrite of this book? What prompted that? And what are you trying to accomplish in this particular book with these particular emphases?
Thank you for what prompted it. There's a lot since 2008 and 2009, and I was one of the early writers in this area, especially pastors or theologians in the modern context. But I think it was really evident within Made to Flourish, particularly since I served there, of the need for this kind of resource. There are many good resources.
And can I actually just pause you real quick, Tom? Because I think most of our listeners probably know Made to Flourish, but some may not. So could you just say just a brief word about Made to Flourish?
Is an organization that came out of Christ Community. It's a separate 501c3 organization that is devoted to this very conversation to really empower and equip pastors in their churches to integrate faith, work, and economic wisdom for the flourishing of their communities. God is blessing Made to Flourish across the country in a wonderful network. And pastors and leaders across the country and the churches that are involved with our network, we were hearing we need a resource that's accessible, biblically faithful, that is up to date, and really geared for a congregant.
Yeah.
And for pastors and leaders in churches to have a resource they feel confident in small groups and really equipping their congregation for vocational discipleship and vocational mission. And with God's grace, we think we hit the target.
Yeah.
We hope this will really be wonderfully used by God across the country, and particularly in Christ's community as well.
Yeah. Well, as someone who got to read an early copy, it is profound, but it is not dense. It is a book that's a pleasure to read. You're able to move through it with ease, especially if you're brand new to this conversation, which I know that was kind of part of your audience, and it really came through. So good work on that, you guys. It's well written. And I'm kind of curious then too, Tom. So it really has been about 15 years since you first started working on that original book. And you said it was kind of, this is the beginning of a conversation. You got to kind of step into it, be a part of it. But what have you been learning over the last 10 or 15 years as you've had more conversations with pastors, with congregation members about this? And I'm just curious, with someone who was early in that conversation, now a decade and a half later, what are things that you're seeing that maybe you didn't see then? Yeah.
Oh, there's so much on that. And I think a couple things come to my mind. We could go for a long time on that. But like when I wrote the first book, I was thinking more cognitive paradigm, of reframing people's thinking about their Monday world. And that's still important. But I hadn't thought of the profound implications of this distortion, of this impoverished paradigm, particularly around a place of worship. Now I really believe that the primary place of worship is not Sunday. Sunday is really important in the local church to gather, but it's really our Monday world where is our primary place of worship. That in itself is woven into the new book. That's profoundly transformational when we think of our Monday world as the primary place we worship God with who we are and what we do and all that we think and feel. But also it is our primary place of spiritual formation.
Yes.
And I hadn't thought enough about that when I wrote the first book. So the spiritual formation and transformation and the Lord Jesus' presence, with us, with God life in our workplace, I hadn't given the kind of profound thought to that. And that's transformational when we understand we never work alone, paid or unpaid, changing diapers or running a company. And that might sound, abstract, but it's really transformational on Monday. But also it's the primary place of gospel plausibility and gospel witness. Plausibility allows us to be a witness to people around us, like by our life and behavior and attitudes and love and service and excellence. It points others to Christ, right, to the gospel. And then it allows us this great place of gospel witness. So there are themes that I had not spent enough time of, the implications and opportunities and the importance of our Monday vocational discipleship of Jesus. And there's much more I could say, but I think that spiritual formation language, that transformation, that apprenticeship with Jesus in our workplace is more intentional and more compelling in this book.
Yeah. Well, I love, Tom, how you've even pointed out, this is the place where Monday is where we're on mission. And increasingly in a global context where you're working with people around the globe, often over, whether that's video or email or those kinds of things, but you're connected with people. You don't have to leave your country and maybe even your desk to have relationships that can be about being a witness for the plausibility of the gospel.
Yeah. And what you're saying, and John, you can jump in here as well, but since the first book, we wrote the second book on the economics of neighborly love. So in this book, we have a chapter that brings some of the best of that ideas, and that is the idea that the primary place we love our neighbor is in our workplace, paid and unpaid. Whether that neighbor is one close to us, a family member, a child that we're caring for, or an elderly adult, or whatever our work is. And to think of neighborly love in that sense of both compassion and capacity is a really vital aspect of thinking about why our work matters so much in transformation.
Yeah. I was just talking with someone the other day who's going to spend 10 days in India connecting with their coworkers who they work with primarily virtually, but this is an opportunity. They're going there to work in those places. And again, if you put the framework of our missional lens on top of the work that we do every day, that trip and those conversations and those interactions, whether local or across the globe, take on a whole new meaning and depth and purpose.
And in this book, we try to link carefully the important biblical theology of the cultural mandate in Genesis, the Great Commandment, and the Great Commission woven together.
Yes, and they do. They belong together. They really do. That's wonderful. Well, I wonder about, for both of you, I would just love to hear a little bit of, and I'll start with you, Johnny. What's one thing you want people to know about this book? What's one thing you just that would just say, I would make them want to go and pick this up and read it? What's that one thing that you think is so important about this?
Yeah, you've heard Tom allude to it already, but it comes from my favorite chapter, chapter 6. And it's the insight that when we invite God into our workplaces themselves become holy ground. And they're a place where God is at work, and you can expect that there are angels around, and that God is at work in bringing His kingdom to bear upon whatever good endeavor is being addressed in that space. And that's the one thing for me that I need as I undertake my work and realize if I am doing it as unto Him and inviting Him in, then my expectation can be on His action with me. That's the one thing.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just going to put you on the spot here, Johnny, and say, do you have a story about that? Can you think of a moment where you've recently started this new kind of dual role? You're working with Made to Flourish, you're doing recruiting and helping with pastoral residencies. You're also continuing to work with our pastoral residency program here at Christ Community. So you've had a lot of change, a lot of, you're really trying to make connections across the country at seminaries and all these institutions. I'm sure there's got to be moments where that feels daunting or overwhelming. And so I'm just wondering that what you just described about God's presence with you, is there a moment where you were at a campus or at your desk, and you just that knowledge that God was with you as you were doing your work, where that was really palpable or made a difference? I don't know if there's a story there.
Totally. Just in a word, I mean, yesterday was my first day back. I just had my third child, Lucy Elizabeth. So
awesome.
Really excited.
Congratulations. We're so excited
thank
for you.
Yeah. But it was my first day back, and I was saying, okay, God, now I'm just entrusting you this work day because it's been 2 weeks off and I'm a little foggy and there's a lot I want to address, but I'm not sure how to get after it. And asked for His help. And frankly, I was helped by your sermon on Sunday, Bill, about asking and the power of asking the one with infinite resources to help me as I tackled this, what felt like mountains of email and mountains of projects that I wasn't sure how to do my work well and what needed to be done. But I prayed and asked for help and then engaged, and I just left my desk at the end of the day fired up and grateful for all that had happened. And it's like, God is real. You just...
I love that. Yeah. Well, and I love you say God is real, because this is, again, where we spend the majority of our time.
That's right.
Is at our desk doing email or whatever it is that God has called you. But that's our work, our calling, our occupation is where we spend the majority of our time. And if we can't have those God is real moments in those spaces, if those God is real moments are only when we're on a hike in a national park or in a moving song in a church service, as important as those are, and they're vital, but the plausibility of our faith, not just for others, but for our own hearts and souls, is going to be really diminished. So I love that you had to, God is real, and helping me get through my email, which is really good. So, Tom, I want to put that same. Go ahead.
Isn't it? I mean, it's true that the tendency for a pastor, for all of us, is to enter our workplace, paid or unpaid, and forget that God exists.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's yes. Or that is not only exists, is present with us and available to us, and longs for our intimacy and give us power and wisdom. But I mean, that sense is very much a part of my journey. It's very easy a pastor to be talking about God, even to studying the Bible, and not be present with Him. And so one of the things we had in this book, which I think is really an insight that I I didn't have in the first one was the observation that Moses was called by God in his workplace, and the burning bush of God's presence and empowerment and direction and wisdom, right? The overwhelming sense of God's presence was in his workplace.
Yeah. Wow.
So we talk quite a bit about it's not just Moses. With the power of the Spirit and the life we have in God's kingdom as apprentices of Jesus, there are burning bushes all around us, right? Even in our workplace, no matter how hard it is, wherever it is, and often we're not attentive to it. Right? It took a while for Moses to go, whoa, this bush is burning, but it's not burned up. Like God is here. So I think one of the big metaphors as well as realities is we would love more and more people who are apprentices of Jesus, whether at Christ Community or around the nation, whoever touches this book, that their lives would be changed in the sense that God is not only real, but there are burning bushes of his presence and empowerment and wisdom everywhere around us in our workplace as well.
Well, I have to smile a little bit because as you're describing this, Tom, I just think of the phrase that people often use around, workplaces when things are going poorly. They say, well, this is a real dumpster fire.
Dumpster fire.
And so I wonder if we start looking at dumpster fires as burning bushes, like waiting for how do we look for God's
presence? But isn't that true theologically? That's right. Existentially, absolutely. That is the presence of the Spirit that is within us and in our workplace, that God is with us. And this is the with God life that apprenticeship with Jesus in our workplace and everywhere else is all about.
And he wants to meet us in those moments of great need and overwhelm. Those are not places where he's far from, but where if we're willing to have the eyes to see,
where his pleasure is there to experience and his goodness.
Well, this is so good. I'm so excited to read the final copy that's coming out, and we'll be able to. You'll be hearing lots more about that, hopefully, and be able to pick up a copy. I don't know when it's going to be available for pre-order, but and I'm not even honestly sure. I'm just going to go for this when this episode is going to come out in relation to that. So we're going to try to sync those things up. But we're very excited to have that conversation, to get that book in your hands, and to experience that. And so, you can find all of the resources that we've mentioned, whether that's other podcast episodes about technology, link to get a hold of that book, whether that's to order it today or to pre-order it. And all that will be in the show notes. And we're just so grateful for you, Tom. You're thinking this area for Johnny, for the two of you being yoked together and laboring together on this project. And it's a joy to get to talk with you about it today.
And we encourage, those who are listening or watching, not only to read the book, but to pray for its blessing. Right? I mean, we are just, very frail people, and it's not some brilliant, perfect book that everyone goes, it's a good book. We really believe that. But it's like the loaves and fishes. God has given us over the years some loaves and fishes that I think he wants to multiply for his kingdom and glory. And it would be wonderful in my heart to have those who are part of Christ's community, other people who would enter into this podcast, not only read the book, but to share it with others.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we will do that. And again, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and it's a pleasure to have you listening on the theFormed.life podcast. We'll see you next time.